just to have as many possible summer dress options. I'm making yet another. I want to talk to you a little bit about style choices because I'm a curvy girl and I'm a plus size, and this style is flattering for me, I think. I like a fitted waist, a soft drapey skirt, a little bit fitted but not too fitted in the bust line. So it's about finding the thing that enhances your best features and balances out those that maybe are not your best to give you sort of an even shape. If you wear your weight around the middle, something fitted like this is not necessarily the best. And that's why you won't see me wearing things that fit real tight across the hip, because that's my widest point. And wherever you have something fitted, it kind of draws a line across that part of your figure and it accentuates it. So I accentuate the small part, not the wide part, as a rule. Let me show you what we're going to work on, because this has the same sort of features. And it is Butterick 6566. I love this dress because it's cute and easy. I'm going to be doing this dress but without the ruffle. It's going to kind of be like this top, this skirt. I don't want the little ruffle on the sleeve either. I want it pretty simple and soft and drapey. The nice thing about this is it's just a pull-on dress, but it doesn't have to be done in a knit because it's elasticized. So, and I really love this one too. I am using, this was a clearance fabric from Hobby Lobby, and it's super soft and drapey, lightweight, and it has little nubbies on it. So all that you need besides this is your thread and some elastic, and we'll get to cutting. Let me show you the alterations that I'm going to be making to this pattern. So here is my bodice back, and I'm cutting on the extra large, but I'm going to come all the way up here and I'm going to give myself this tiny bit of extra length and go to the double XL. So everything's extra large except right here. You can see I've drawn that little line to come up. So that's what I'm going to do, bodice front and back. So here's the front, same thing. I just want to give myself as much room as I can because I know I'm a little long-waisted and it helps. So I'm going to do the same thing on the sleeve. It'll be an extra large sleeve, but I'm going to come all the way up here. And that's just so that the arm's eye matches when I put the sleeve into the bodice. And then this has a pocket. But look at how long that pocket is. That is a huge pocket. Here's my tie, and I always cut the ties longer. So I'm just going to come to the end of the paper and give myself, that'll give an extra inch maybe. I may even do more if I have enough fabric for it. Now here's the skirt. Now it's the exact same pattern piece. We're cutting them 2 times on the fold, once for the front and once for the back, which is great if you carry your weight evenly. I do not. So the first thing I'm going to do is I've eased out from the waistline so that I'm giving myself some extra fullness in the skirt through the hip where I need it. But because the front and the back are cut the same, when I go to cut the back, I'm going to lengthen this back just a tiny bit. What I find for me is that the skirt's hemline is often uneven. It's a little dips down in the front and up in the back, and that's because I have a lot more derriere to go around. A lot more back here. So I'm going to fix that when I go to do the back. I'm going to give myself a little extra length in the back, and then hopefully that'll help keep my hemline nice and straight when I'm standing. Because I have 60-inch wide fabric, it's very easy for me to get this laid out the way it needs to go. But I want to talk to you about the fabric itself, which I forgot to mention. It's 100% rayon, and rayon does not usually like to be machine washed and dried. Depending on how it's made, it can turn very hard and papery and really change the soft drapey flow that we bought the fabric for. So for pre-treating my rayon, I put it in the machine on delicate, cold, short cycle. And then I put it in the dryer on delicate, lowest setting for 20 minutes, checked it, and then did another 20 minutes. Because I want to be able to, after it's sewn, I probably will delicate cycle it and then hang it to dry. I won't throw it in like my cottons and some of my other things because I know it can change the texture of it. However, pre-treating it the first time helps kind of prepare the fabric, and it also, if there is going to be any shrinkage or loss, I've done it. Check your fiber content. So here's my layout. You can see I have my skirt front. Here's my tie, my pocket, my bodice front, which also has to be on the fold. Here's the bodice back. Now I have all of this to drop down so that I can get one more of the skirt panels, and I'm going to lengthen it a little bit at the bottom. So it'll be the same at the side, but slowly droop a little bit, and then another sleeve. And I have a lot of fabric, like more than a yard left, so I can easily get it out of what's left. Last bit of cutting, I've already got what I showed you done. So here's my back. Here's my back skirt. It's the same piece. Here's the front. I just unpinned. And here, can you see the yellow line? That's my cutting line. I've lengthened it 1 inch at the very center back, and I've slowly eased it back in so it matches at the side seam. My extra pocket, because we've got, you could do just 1 pocket, but I'm going to do pockets on both sides, which is how the pattern shows it. And here's the sleeve. Now I'm combining 2 views. I've got the view A sleeve with the view D dress, and I'm not doing the ruffle, so I'm kind of changing it up. So when I bought fabric, I bought 2 3/4 yards of 60-inch wide fabric. Now that we're all cut out, I want to remind you that I am doing sort of the view A bodice on the view D skirt. That's sort of how it's working out for me, except on the view A bodice it has an extra ruffle on the bottom of the sleeve that I'm not doing. So with all that said, the very first thing we're going to do is step 1, which is to sew up our center back seam on our bodice. At home, if you don't have a serger, you can do a French seam here. You can straight stitch it and zigzag your seam allowance however you want to, but I would definitely do a seam finish, especially if you're doing a woven. Now if you're doing a knit, you could sew this whole thing together on a small zigzag. So here's my back bodice. I'm going to put right sides together, and I'm just going to serge it together. This has 5/8 inch seam allowance. The waistline is 3/4 of an inch because we're putting a casing in there, so it's got a little extra in the waistline. I'm just going to serge this down, and when you serge, you lose a little bit of your seam allowance. So I'm serging this so that it is finished on the 5/8 inch line, and anything excess, my serger takes it off. So here's the little tails it's taken off. Pretty simple. So once we've done that, we're going to skip all the view B parts as far as the back. Now if you're doing the view B, that has the drawstring kind of comes through and makes your shoulder, which is really cute. I definitely want to try that view also. It's on sort of the little romper pant playsuit view. But we're going to skip down to step 4, which is where we're going to sew front to back on the side seams. I'm not sure if it's the wheel or if there's a dip in the floor, but there's a spot that I always struggle to get over. Again, we're matching this up right sides together. And then I like to press as I go, so I'm going to stop and press here in just a minute, all of these seams. But on the sleeve, it does have notches to help you mark your front and your back of your sleeve. So make sure you mark all your notches so you can get your sleeve in correctly. It's going to feel a little wonky if you don't. So now we have a bodice put together, and we're ready to work on the sleeve. Now I'm not doing the little ruffle at the bottom, so the next few steps are for ruffle. So we're going to skip past those and go to the actual little sleeve. Now we're ready to take our sleeve. We're going to sew this thing together. So we're going to sew the sleeve together underneath first. So we're doing a little underarm stitch, and then I'm going to serge all the way around it while I'm there. I'm going to flip this around and let you see. Can you see these little loops right here? Let me duck my head so it doesn't focus on me. There's some little loops. And what that is on the serger at the back of my machine right back here, the thread slipped out and lost its tension. And I got loops on that second needle. Now the nice thing is I can find that thread and pull it. So here's the little loops because it slipped out of the tension, and here's the thread that's connected to it. So when I pull, can you see the loops pulling back in? Now it's nice and tight, and just how it should look. Make sure you pull the right one or it'll really mess up your thing. But when you find the right thread, you can pull it and you can tighten it back up. So I'll do that. I'm going to slide over here and to the ironing board and give everything a quick press. And while I'm there, I'm going to turn up the hem and press it in and hem those sleeves before I move on to setting them in. It's just easier to work with the sleeve when it's in its own little unit and not attached to the whole bodice. So ironing for a few minutes, and then we'll set in our sleeves. Pressing always makes your seams look nicer. It's just a good thing to do. I'm getting ready to press in my sleeve. You can see how tiny it is, press the hem in. And I've just pulled out my tailor's ham because it will fit inside to make it easier to just fold up and press around the hem. And then I'm just gonna top stitch it in. Just want a tiny hem in this. It's set for 5/8 of an inch and add a ruffle, which I'm not going to do. So you could do a full 5/8 inch or you could do something narrower, which is what I'm going to do. I've pressed up my hem and we're just going to top stitch around for both sleeves. We have our little sleeves hemmed, little hems in, and now I'm going to find the back of my sleeve right here, and I'm going to find the back of my bodice, which is right here. I'm going to lay this down so you can see my armhole, or my part of my armhole anyway, and I'm going to match back of sleeve to back of bodice, so it's going to be this side. So here's my underarm, and that's going to come around. We're going to pin that together and sew it in for both sleeves. All right, sleeves are ready to go in. I'm just going to show you how it looks to have them pinned in. So you're looking at the sleeve, and then this is from the inside. All right, so we're just going to go around that really quickly. I'm serging it in at the 5/8 inch. If you're at the sewing machine, you can bias bind this if you want, sew it at your 5/8 and then do a bias binding. You can zigzag your seam allowance. If you don't have an overlock machine, what is the deal with the sticky wheel? What is the deal with the sticky wheel? Okay, I have got my sleeves in, so my bodice is together. I'm very happy with that little sleeve. That's about what I wanted, just a little tiny sleeve. So now we're ready to work on our casing and our elastics. We need to cut out our elastic. Pattern piece 5 is for you just to measure your elastic against and cut it. Now, not stretched. Your elastic lays flat. You don't want to stretch it to that length. You want to lay it flat and cut it, and then have the stretch beyond that. So I don't cut out that pattern piece. I just lay my tape measure on it wherever it is on the pattern and measure it. For mine, that's 42 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and cut my 42-inch piece of elastic. And then for the casing, the way the pattern is set up, you will fold under 1/4 inch, and then fold again another 1/2 inch, and you get and it uses up a 3/4 inch total, and that is for your casing. So I'm going to do that. Now, if you don't want to do all that folding and pressing, etc., you can serge that edge and then fold under the whole 3/4 inch and make your casing that way. Just make sure you leave a little hole in the back for feeding your elastic through. So I've got here's my piece of elastic for my casing later, and I'm going to go ahead now, go to the ironing board, and I'm going to press under, so pressing to the wrong side 1/4 inch all the way around. And once I've pressed that, I'm going to come back and press again another 1/2 inch, and then I'll top stitch. Now this is my center back, and I'm going to leave a little hole at the center back so I can fish my elastic through. So you want to leave it a hole usually somewhere on the back, so back shoulder or back center back, where it will be hidden more. You just don't want it in the front of the neckline where it's more noticeable. So we're going to go press all that under and top stitch it, and then feed through our elastic, and the top of our bodice is done, and we'll be ready to move on to the skirt portion. Step 1 is pressing under that 1/4 inch. Once that's pressed, we'll come back, measure our 1/2 inch, and press again. This is my center back. And once we've done that, and it's all pressed and happy, put some pins in it, and then we're going to stitch right next to that fold line all the way around. We're going to leave a little opening. So we're going to start here, and we'll stop here. Here's my center back. So this will be a hole so we can fish our elastic through. All right, this is how it looks. There's our 1/4 inch pressed, and then our 1/2 inch. And now I'm getting it under the machine to stitch, and we want to stitch, I've turned back half, so we want to go down a little bit farther than half so that I'm making sure I'm catching the edge. You don't want to miss the edge of your fold here. And we're going to stitch around. I think I'm going to start and stop in a back shoulder because I think it's the least conspicuous for that little hole for feeding through our elastic and sewing back up later. So I have a casing around the neckline, and I have an opening right here at this shoulder seam in the back. You can see my back seam. So here's my little opening, and I've got my elastic. So let me find a safety pin. We're going to fish our elastic all the way around through that hole. So here's our little hole. We're going to just poke it in and fish it through, and I always take the tail, the free end, and pin it down to the seam because the casing is larger than your elastic. That's how it works. And because of that, you can pull your elastic all the way through unintentionally, but if you pin it down like that, you can't. It's stuck. So now we can just fish, 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 and got it for me. Okay, I'm looking at this because I've almost got all the elastic in, and the main thing is I want to make sure that it's not too loose. I don't want a gappy neck. That's always a concern because I do take care of other people some and bend over and move things, and I do not want my falling open. All right, I'm through. We're going to overlap our two ends. Got two ends. You want to make sure that your elastic is not twisted anywhere in this neckline. And we're going to overlap our two little ends, zigzag or straight stitch. You want to really get those so that they're stuck good to each other. I usually overlap close to an inch. I want it in each direction, so you lose almost 2 inches of elastic. So you take that into mind. Like it allows, I think, a ½ inch overlap. They don't say how much overlap. They just say to overlap, but I do a full inch because I like it to be nice and secure. And once that's done, we'll pull it inside and stitch closed our little holes. And we just pull to even out our gathers. And now you can kind of see how it's going to lay. And now here's my hole on the wrong side right here. So I'm going to just pull this straight, and I'm going to top stitch. I'm just going to connect my stitching across there, and this little bodice part will be done, and we'll start our skirt. Completely disappears because you're lined up your stitching. So there's our little bodice. So now we're going to move all the way down to, they didn't put the pocket in the skirt, but we're going to. Are you kidding me? They include a pocket and we wouldn't use it? That's not going to happen. All right, so let's unpin our little pockety pockets. And we're going to follow instruction 29 for the pant, but we're going to use it on our skirt. The pattern, the front and the back of the skirt are the same, but they aren't for me. I lengthened the back of my skirt just a little bit. So I have a safety pin in the front skirt. So I know this is the front, this is the one I didn't alter, because when I'm through, I want to make sure I get the longer piece in the back. So we're going to just take our little skirt pieces, and all they have us do is sew right sides together on all the corners, your pocket on the side seams. That's all they're doing. And the way it's done, the way I'm going to do it. So when working with pockets, a couple things we have to consider is where they join, how we're going to seam finish, so we don't end up with like a little corner with no seam finish, or where it buckles funny because we overlapped. If you look at how they do it, they're just sewing it on, and then they're going to come back and do a bunch of top stitching and sew around the pocket, but they don't really show how to seam finish. And as a matter of fact, they clip it open right here because of how they've sewn it. So that's fine, except that where this clip is, there's no seam finishes. So this frays and falls apart, and it's right below the pocket where you have lots of stress, and I just don't like to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go ahead and serge around the curved part of all 4 pockets. Then I'm going to go ahead and lay my pocket down and serge all the way down. So I will have this completely seam finished and this completely seam finished with these two together on all 4 corners. So we're just going to do right sides together. First I'm going to do the pockets, lay it down right sides together, and do this. I was complaining about my wheels giving me issues, and I dropped something on the floor, crawled down on the floor to get it out from behind the cabinet, and noticed that my wheels of my chair are just wound up with lots of threads. I wonder how that happened. So anyway, I think that's going to be a project soon for another day. Let me show you the skirt, where we're at so far. So I serged around my pockets, around the curvy part, and then I serged the pocket onto the skirt. So I have skirts with ears. So all of the skirt pieces kind of look like this. And everything serged on these outer edges. I didn't do the waist or the hem. So that now that that's done, and I've only serged on the on this cut edge. I didn't serge on the 5/8 inch because when we take our two skirt pieces together, so we're going to take our front to our back, and we're going to line them up. And now we're going to sew what would have been our 5/8 inch. So if I line these on top of each other, and you can see my seam here, I can measure from that seam over to here, and I can sew 5/8 inch down. And there's actually markings on the shorts. They did not plan for you to put pockets in this skirt. I'm just telling you that, I don't know why. What? Dresses need pockets. This should have been planned for, but it fits just fine. So I'm going to put a pin in this, pin it into submission here. So I'm pinning my little pockets out here together. So these line up. And then, but what I'm actually going to be worried about sewing first is I'm laying pocket on top of the pocket, and I'm going to measure from this edge of my seam here over to 5/8, and I'm going to sew down about 2 inches, 2 to 3 inches. I'm just going to sew straight stitch straight down and back stitch, and that's sort of the top of the skirt below the waist. And then I'm going to come down to the bottom of the pocket about 1.5 inches or so up, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start there, and I'm going to sew all the way down to the bottom, and that gives us the side seam of the skirt with the pocket opening. And then we can come back and sew around the pocket. All right, so I'll do a little close-ups for you, but that's what we're going to do for both sides. And then we will be ready to, let me look at our thing. Then we're going to be putting our bodice to our skirt. So here's our skirt top. This is the waistline. You can see where I've just serged right on the edge our pocket. So I've got a pin up here just holding it together, and I'm going to measure over from here 5/8 of an inch, and I'm going to straight stitch down, keeping that 5/8 inch line about 3 inches, and back stitch. And then I'm going to come down to the bottom of the pocket where I'm also pinned together, and I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to measure over about 5/8 of an inch, but I'm going to come up 1.5 inches to 2 inches from the bottom of the pocket and stitch down. That leaves all of this open for your hand and your cell phone or whatever else you put in your pockets up here, taken care of, but we'll get all of our side seams done, so we're going to do that on both sides. Once that's done, we're going to come back and we'll just zip all the way around the pocket. So here you can see stitching for the top of the waist above the pocket, and here it is below the pocket, and this goes all the way down and then around the pocket. So now it's open, and then this pocket piece, this whole thing is going to get pushed to the front and pinned down. Now that the skirt is all together, I'm going to go ahead and just serge around the hem. I've pressed open the seam from below the pocket. It's the only place I've worried about it. The top of my pocket, the pocket hiding right there, and then I've just pinned over the pocket pieces in the front. So this is the front of my skirt, and I'm going to serge around it. The hem, just to get this seam finish taken care of. All right, I'm tipping down towards my lap here so you can see. I've got the skirt on the inside here and the top on the outside, or the bodice, and I've matched them up at the side seam here and at the center front and the center back, and I'm just pinning around, so the waist of the skirt to the waist of the bodice all the way around. And I'll show you on here, it's number 33, all views. So we're putting those together and we're going to stitch around, and the way they do it is they stitch all the way around, and then they do a second stitch on the edge, and they leave a hole to feed through your elastic. Now I'm going to serge this edge, this very cut edge, so I'm actually going to leave the hole on this, the one that I'm getting ready to sew. This has, I believe, a 3/4 inch seam allowance at this waist. So I'm going to serge this edge together. I'm going to come down 3/4 of an inch and stitch all the way around. I'm going to leave a little opening in that straight stitch to feed my elastic through, and then I'll come back and sew it shut. And then we'll just have to put in our hem, because I've already serged, let me find it. Here's my hemline. I've already serged around the hemline, so it's ready for me to put in a hem. So here's the waist. Currently, I've just done the straight stitch, and let me find, here's my little hole that I'm going to feed the elastic through. Now I'm going to go ahead and go to the serger, and I'm just going to serge this edge all the way around. And when I do that, see, it's catching my pockets. Everything is caught in there, and it finishes it all up. It seals it off. And then the space between that serged edge and this sewn edge is where my elastic casing will be. Right, here it is all serged. So you can see here's my little hole, and I'm going to have to access it from the other side, and here's my elastic. Now it says measure your waist, add 1 inch, and cut your elastic for that. I will tell you that I tend to usually go a little smaller than my waist because it just doesn't stretch enough. Like, it stretches out and it makes the waist bigger than I want. So if you want, it depends on the fit you want. So I actually made my elastic about 2 inches smaller than my waist, and with the overlap it'll make it 3 to 4 inches smaller. Being through the casing and all that fabric stretches it back out. Anyway, I'm gonna feed this through, and to do that, because of how I did my casing, I've got to go inside here and find my hole. So I flipped it around to the right side, and here you can see is the little hole for my casing right there in the back waist. So I'm gonna go ahead and just fish it around, and once I'm done, I'll flip this back to the wrong side and stitch this closed. We have a dress. Da-da-da. That's the back, here we go. So here's our cute little dress. Got elastic in it, got elastic up here. So all that's left is the hem. Now this has a curved hem, and if you're struggling with that, you can run a little basting line along that hem and pull it to help it curve up when you go to turn to stitch down your hem. You can hand whip it or machine straight stitch it. I'm just gonna straight stitch my hem up. And then we also have a little tie, and the tie is nice and easy. We're just going to put right sides together and sew the 2 pieces together on this little short straight edge like this, and I'm going to serge it. So now we have one long tie. Now we're going to fold it this way, right sides together, and stitch around. And you want to leave a little hole. I'm going to leave mine back here in the middle to turn it inside out, and then we'll stitch shut that hole, and we'll have our tie done too. So very easy little tie. Okay, I'm going to finish my tie, put my hem in, and I'll show you the finished dress. Have a finished dress. Let's see how it looks. It's a cute dress, but I'm not happy with how it looks, and this is why. I don't like the little pook in the front that hangs down oddly right there on top, and I think the neckline's a little wide, so we're going to fix that. I've opened up a teeny tiny hole, which is where I had the original hole. I cut out a 6-inch hank of the elastic, and I'm getting ready to sew it back up and sew my little hole up and see how I like it. So it's a new day. It's actually been over a week since I made it. I've made the alterations. I actually wore the dress pre-alterations for a day, and that helped me decide I wanted to change the tiny bit that I did. I also spilled coffee on it because it was my errand day with my mom, and I'm in the car for 5 to 6 hours that day running errands and driving back and forth, and you probably can hear the hammering on the camera. There's construction happening right outside my sewing room window. So I'll switch over to voiceover and tell you a little bit about how I feel now that I've done the alterations. I know it was a small alteration, but I'm very pleased that I did it. I just feel like the front lays a lot more smoothly now. I don't have a funny little pooky part in that near the belt tie. Look at how smooth that looks now on my waistline. I'm really pleased. I think the skirt still stays nice and drapey. You can see it's a little bit wrinkly, and that's the fabric. I have actually worn it, washed it, dried it, spilled some coffee on it. I've been wearing it today before I filmed this a little bit, so these are the wear wrinkles that this fabric has. You can see the neckline with my hair out of the way. It's just a little higher, and I feel more comfortable with that. I think it's still pretty and drapey. I'm really pleased. I want to make it again. See you next week for another fun video.